Hey everybody, it's Ken Pooch Van Druten here with you, along with Chris Rabold again.
What's up, guys?
We really liked a bunch of your comments back and from yesterday's videos that we posted, and we feel like maybe we're going to keep posting maybe a couple of these a week or maybe more, depending on if we're having a lot of fun doing it. But thanks a lot for posting it, and if you are enjoying it, please subscribe to my channel. Tell all your friends. The more subscriptions we get, the more it'll push us to want to do events later in the future. I know Chris and I have been talking about doing some, live events in person in the future when we can all get out of this craziness of living at home. But the more that we do this online and the more people that we get interested in it, that'll push us more in that direction. So tell your friends, have them come down here, check it out. And we appreciate you subscribing and checking it out. So how are you today, Chris, in this weird, wacky...
I'm all right.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, I've had trouble gaining traction on the day.
Yeah.
But I've had some good audio. I've spoken to some peers, arranged some gear to make it to me. You know what I mean? I've staying busy, just like everybody.
Well, good.
So I'm good is the answer to that. I'm great.
Yeah, that sounds not great.
You? How are you today, Pooch?
Man, it's a weird, wacky world, right? Just the fear of financial insecurity right now in our business is, man, it's hard. We're all feeling it. All of us. I'm sure all you people that are watching this, it's around the world. Everyone is stopped. No one is working, and when we don't work, we don't make money. So yeah, it's hard, man. It's hard.
I heard from a peer today, someone asking me, of course, we're all speculating daily, but asking about, have you guys been pushed back through the summer yet? And then it just went the banter back and forth between, well, what I see happening. We were kind of on the same page. And, it's the grim reality of how long this might take. It's
well,
it's
yeah,
sobering, but
it is. I mean, so like yesterday, they just pushed shelter in place here in Dallas until May 20th. And so that means like literally we're not supposed to leave our house until May 20th. And I'm sure they'll push that more. The hard part about this is that even when the government says it's all clear and everybody can go back out and go back to work, I think it's going to be several months before we go back to work because people are still going to be scared going to shows. So I don't know. I don't want to paint a grim picture for all you guys out there, but it's hard. I think we're all kind of sitting here. It's the fear of the unknown right now. But anyway, hang in there. And while you're, at home, I'm telling everybody, all my friends, everyone, I'm trying to spend as much time learning as I can while I have this time. So like I was thinking about taking some networking courses and, that kind of stuff. I haven't yet, to be honest, but I've been looking into that to kind of, mitigate my time. But anyway, enough about all that stuff. Let's talk about audio.
Yeah, let's escape for a little while. I dig it.
Yeah,
I dig it.
Let's escape for a little while. You're right. That's absolutely right. We've been talking about drums. Yesterday, we talked about triggers, and then we went on to talk about mic placement and that kind of stuff. But before we get kind of back into drums, because I figure that maybe if we just continue down that road a little bit, it'll make sense to people out there. I have this thing about watching younger engineers like at festivals or engineers that are opening up for me, and I'll be standing there and listening to their mix and trying to understand what it is that they're trying to achieve, right? So in other words, I'm not saying that it sounds bad. I'm just saying I'm standing there and I'm watching an engineer and there are like zero dynamics. Like it sounds like a record right now, which is completely just squashed and, there's absolutely no dynamics in the world. And what kind of made me think about this, I don't want to travel down this weird rabbit hole, but what made me think about this morning was I was listening to the Peter Gabriel So record. And I was listening to it and I was going, man, this record is so badass. Like it has crazy dynamics in it. I mean, even for back then.
How loud things can sound in that record.
Or
a record of its time.
Yeah. Not only that, but just like how soft things are and then how loud things are.
That's what I'm saying. It's almost like they have more dynamic range to work with. And guess what they do?
They do.
Records weren't within this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me come back around and kind of connect that tissue in the sense of when I watch a younger engineer work now, I almost think that maybe they don't know what sounds good. Like they're not spending enough time studying records that were prior to whatever 1994 or whatever, when the L1 and the L2 completely destroyed the record industry as far as dynamics go. And there was loudness wars. Prior to that, there were records that had dynamics and there were things that sounded good. And it's part of the reason that I love mixing live stuff now is because I get to mix dynamics. So I guess the question to you is, number one, do you feel that that's true? Do you think, like I recommend to young guys that they should be listening to, Peter Gabriel, whatever records prior to the loudness wars, and what records are those for you? And also another question that I always get asked is, what do I use to tune PAs with? What songs or whatever? Maybe you can answer those two questions. Answer those two questions, and then I'll tell you what my answers are to this. So, what songs do you use to tune a PA with?
So, and I'll tell you this, some of the songs that I use, you know how you'll get that collective sort of uproar sometimes from crews, like as soon as you start your tuning thing, you'll hear someone's, there he goes again. And a lot of the stuff that I use, and I've changed it all several times over, but some of it I'm more tired of than anybody could possibly imagine. However, it's a tool.
That's it.
And I know it. And that's the key with that. Whatever you use for tuning is that it's a tool. And you have to know it so incredibly well that it's almost not even making decisions based on it. It's just acting intuitively, So for myself, for years, it was a Michelle and Degacello, which is a newer, maybe that's early 2000s, 90. No, that would have been 90s, maybe early 90s. One of her records, there was a song from there that I really liked called The Way. Then I moved on to, I really like Andy Wallace. Now we're not going back to some cooler 80s stuff or, like Clear Mountain per se. Some of this is newer. I like Andy Wallace's mixes a lot. Ironically, I don't always like his snare. I like everything else.
Interesting.
But sometimes, it's weird, but I think he's an amazing mixer and he mixes with so much power and aggression, yet with clarity. So I would use a Rage tune, take the power back, which now I've shortened to only I have a loop with the kick drum.
Yep.
And then the bass comes in a little, you know what I'm talking about. And I use that just to check the integrity of the sub alignment, to the rest of the rig. And on occasion, I'll bust out that whole thing, and people usually enjoy it when I do that because it's something different. There was a newer, as cliche as Steely Dan is, there was a newer Steely Dan track that I started using, which I've now grown to both hate as a song and hate sonically, yet it's such a tool that I still will use it.
Yeah.
And that is another one. And speaking of things like we were talking about, you'll see mics that'll catch on. That was this song Godwhacker, which has kind of caught favor with systems guys. That one, then I've got a couple more. and I won't give you a million of them. No, you know what? I will go back. I'll use Talking Heads' Naive Melody, which has a ton of tape hiss on it. I like it. I also know it's too heavy at 2K, but it's a tool.
Interesting.
But one of modern I will use because it doesn't have any dynamics, yet it is modern mixing, which is also what we do, even if we're inspired from different times. I'll listen to there's a Drake song, and I've totally spaced on the name, which is not helping anyone. But
That's all right.
I'll remember it in a little while. But
okay.
I heard it at a speaker demo, and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I'll use that one. So, but finally, the one I want to mention, I got some other. I'll use Pink Floyd Money just because it's fun to listen to the panning at the beginning.
Totally.
And the bass sounds amazing. The vocal can hurt live. There's an Adele song. Anyway, I'm going on and on, but there's one I do want to mention. It's this song, Finlay Quay, who's I believe Scottish, or I can't remember what. It's from the 90s. And it's this song called Even After All. And it's really mellow, which is cool because if I need to play it 20 times, it's not super annoying. But what I like about it, it's not the most sonically all around pleasing song ever. But what is super critical in that song is the bass guitar, particularly 100 hertz to 200 hertz, which is all of that stuff that we are inclined to go, oh, it's muddy in here, and cut. And what you'll find when you play that song is that if you cut too much of that and told yourself you just clean the room up, then you'll listen to the song. And if that bass guitar doesn't poke out in all the right ways, and if all of those notes aren't even, you're kidding yourself, put it back.
But you put too much, you cut too much. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. So those are the tunes. Those are the things that I cannot believe I'm blanking on the Drake tunes, but
that's all right, dude.
I'll do that, and then I'll couple it with. I usually won't put vocals in. Sometimes I don't like to do a lot of virtual playback through the PA. I know you do. I don't, because sometimes it's almost like a bug zapper concept. Like I don't want band guys hearing it and flocking to front of house because they're drawn to the light. You know what I mean? So what I'll do is I'll play like the rhythm section, or I'll drop stuff in and out, but I always do it mindful of if the band is around or not, because I don't want to draw the, hey man, what are you doing? Can I listen? Oh, God damn it. So
I totally get that, but
for you, that's the whole point, is to listen to it in its environment, right? I know.
It's funny because, it's like I used to be the guy that would listen to all kinds of different stuff, and I still do. I have tools. First off, let me address, I think it's funny that you say that you have a particular producer that you like. I'm the same way. I'm like, okay, I like, the guy that does used to do all the Tears for Fears records. I like his style. His vocals are really super mid-rangey, and if you can get them to sound right in a PA, then you know that you have your 1K to 4K range right. So I used to listen to a bunch of different Tears for Fears songs. That guy's name is David Bascombe. He's fucking amazing. But I think it's you touched on a really good point, which is we choose music, number one, that we know intimately. Like I know forwards and backwards how that song sounds and how it sounds on different systems. I've used it, like that Tears for Fears stuff I've used since I mix in clubs. So I know what it sounds like on crappy PAs. I know what it sounds like on a good PA. All those kind of things. I know what's going to happen when I play that song. I know how the PA is going to respond. So that's you guys out there. You need to choose a piece of music that that intimately. That's really. But the other part of that you touched on, which is really important, is choosing different bits of music for different parts of the frequency range. Right.
For sure.
I'll use 3 or 4 different things. I use Godwhacker too. I think that's from Mike Hackman, actually. Who
got it from me.
Perfect. So there you go.
That's the incestuous nature of how this all works.
Indeed. Yeah.
Trade them off. That's fun.
So
shout out to Stacker. Awesome,
shout out to Stacker. So Mike is my system engineer for Iron Maiden, and he's been a system engineer for Chris. So that's where that connection is. Anyway, world-class system guy. Amazing. Anyway, so Yeah, I just kind of wanted to touch on that and talk a little bit about one other thing I think is hilarious that you use Steely Dan. My question is always like, the guy that mixes Steely Dan, what does he use?
I know, and I've tried to get away. You'll hear me say this. You'll hear me say this a lot. In that I try to get away from things. For instance, in our video the other day, I was talking about I'm trying to move away from 91. There's always things I'm trying. That's just in my personality where I'm like, I should be able to do it without this. And then I'll come back around, you know? And the Steely Dan thing, just so I don't have to say I use Steely Dan. Because, of course, everyone thinks of the truly classic Steely Dan, which everyone used to tune with. And I did some of that more stereotypical stuff. I did what was the Sting, Tim Sumner's Tales record, which everyone used forever.
Yeah, I did too.
What I didn't answer was your question about hearing kind of what people are influenced by as it pertains to newer mixes. And yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I just hear a lot of really flat mixes, you know? And I think this is not a novel concept, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that everyone forget plugins. Just if they're using a digital desk, they've got a compressor and a gate and whatever else they want on every channel. And they feel inclined to use it, and they're not using it with thoughtfulness or with purpose. Not saying that I haven't been there myself and still don't go there on occasion where I'm just trying things. But I do think there's a lot of doing things without thought that are creating to some of these lifeless, flat mixes. The guys that are doing modern production right have found a way to have few dynamics, yet it's still impactful. You know what I mean? And that, if you think about it, when we saw the loudness come into play in the late 90s, man, there's a lot of bad sounding records from there. Now, as time has gone on, we still, the dynamic range, if anything, has gotten even smaller. But guys and gals have figured out how to do it with impact, which is an art unto itself. A lot of what those EDM guys are doing, I know it seems like, oh, it's just this or it's just that. Yeah, but they're making it slam with 3 dB of head. Like, how?
No, that's right.
So that's an art. And and I don't necessarily have that skill set 100%. I can tell you my mix is pretty much a Mars bar when you look at it. I mean, it's pretty flat too. I got to be honest. But because I'm like you.
I think it is because that's the sound of today, right? So the artists that we're working for, you know, minus Iron Maiden, obviously when I'm talking about Iron Maiden, it's a whole other thing. But for instance, you know, Bruno Mars or Justin Bieber or whatever, we're trying to, I call it making a record with impact is what I'm trying to achieve with a live, you know, situation right now. I'm looking for it to sound like the record, but maybe have a little bit more, you know, sub-impact information. Those are the kinds of things that people want when they come to see a live show. But ultimately, my goal is to create the record. And so in order to do that, I have to kind of replicate what's happening with the record. So I've been dragged kind of kicking and screaming in this dynamic war in the sense of, you know, I too, if you look on my output of my master bus, you know, it looks very mastered. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of compression on it, and it's, you know, but like I do things where I'll ride the outputs of my console to the PA by like 3 dB or sometimes even like 5 dB in dynamic sections. Like in a verse, I might tuck the PA just a little bit and then punch the downbeat of a chorus in order to create dynamics that maybe don't exist.
Right.
Do you do anything like that?
It's funny. And first of all, that actually is a very studio mindset, you know, in a way, you know, to gas the chorus,
yes,
you know, or to do this, to pull back. So yeah, it's funny. Yes and no. Once I park first of all, my master bus, which is like the final pass through, it stays at 0 all the time. I never touch it.
Me too.
Once I found the place for my matrix out, like I send everything just left, right out of the desk. There's no subs on an aux or anything like that. And then it all gets done within the processors. I don't ride that. What I will do in very, very, very few sections. I don't do it from like verse to chorus. I'll do it. Really, I only do it with my shows that have that are pop, or something that's got a hip hop element or something. If there's like a track that drops at 4, but what I'll do is, because I keep the band and the tracks, for instance, on separate VCAs, I'll push those. Mind you, they're only pushing further into limiting
of the output.
And
yeah.
So if I push them 3 dB, I might only be getting something, but it still sounds louder.
I understand.
So I do it knowing that all you're really doing is compressing it more, but it does sound. It sounds louder.
It does.
Yeah.
And also, we talk about this all the time, that API 2500, if you hit the thrust part of that, if you knock into that by 3 dB, it actually causes an EQ thing to happen that makes it sound bigger. As you hit that compressor harder, it thrusts the mid-range out at you. So I'm sure you're experiencing some of that too. If you're using the API on your output, I do.
Which I certainly am. As well.
Later in a whole other video, we're going to get to talk about, because I'm the in the box guy and you're the guy that uses a lot of analog stuff. So let's definitely.
I'm around the box.
You're around the box. That's great. Anyway, so I just wanted to speak to a little bit about dynamics, because I feel like that younger engineers maybe need to study that more. Like, they don't know about it, right? They don't know because you mix something based upon what you've listened to, right? Like, I think you become an engineer based on the music that you listen to. So I always tell younger guys that they should listen to music prior to them being born. Because there was a period of time in recordings where it was analog recording, and so it was a bit warmer, and the dynamics that existed back then may teach you something about how to be a better front of house mixer. That's kind of what I was getting at, if that makes sense.
If I can make maybe one last point on that too, because you're so right, and it's so important. There's a lot of like when we were talking about, we went to tuning music. That's not my favorite music. None of that. Not even close to what I want to listen to. And mind you, for years, I would come off tour with this mega $1 million PA, and then I had a 86 Ford pickup truck that had a AM FM cassette player. This is like 5 years ago, with one blown out speaker that sat behind. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
There's listening to music, and then there's mixing. So I'll use those things for their sonic qualities, but like, there's a lot of times when I'm mixing where I'm thinking about Led Zeppelin, which certainly sounds amazing, but it's not always the most conducive to PA tuning. Like, I try to choose things a lot of times that are clean.
Sure.
For those, you know what I mean? But when I'm mixing, I'm thinking about big guitars, or I'm thinking about, or go back to listen to Quincy Jones mixes.
Oh man,
those things aren't squashed to death,
dude.
Off the Wall is huge sounding. It sounds like there's 700 dB of headroom,
dude.
So I'm thinking about those sounds when I'm mixing. One last thing I want to say too, it's also easier, I think, for a younger mixer to get caught up, because what are you and I talking about? We're talking about processing, and we're naming all these plugins or this is and that, and it'd be easy to get caught up in the notion of like, I have to do that. Also, I have to do that, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing with it, which will create a lifeless, small, squished mix. So I think there's a lot of pressure on people to use a lot of stuff, and if you're not using it in maybe the total proper way, you're going to end up with this little flattened piece of nothingness.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I tell this story all the time. It's like the guys that I see that are not succeeding are generally the ones that I walk up and look at their desk, and there's just plugins everywhere and stuff everywhere. Yeah. And stuff engaged, EQs on top of EQs, and those are the guys that are not succeeding. I think that people people get lost in the equipment part of this, right? Like it's kid in a candy store. I think that you and I came up in an era where, in analog land, when I had an XL4, I might have had maybe two 1176s. And I had to decide what each one of those analog 1176s was going to be on. Like, okay, one of these is going to be on the bass guitar and the other one's going to be on the snare drum, I think. But now in this kid in a candy store world that we live in, you can have 45 instances of an 1176 and people are misusing that. You know what I mean? They're taking that sound and putting 1176s on every channel. You know what I mean? And the end result is often not very good when you do that. Less is more. Like I always, we talked about kind of the four fundamentals of stuff, where it was mic choices and mic placement. Those things are way more important than like talking about whatever plugins, So yeah, man. Anyway, I think it's an interesting discussion. I urge you guys, you guys are audio professionals. You should be listening to music that inspires you to, be dynamic or whatever about your mixing. The guys that I watch that are kind of failing are guys that I wonder if they don't know what sounds good. Do you know what that makes? Does that make sense?
I do. I also think the bar, we might be hard pressed to get off this topic for this one because I think it's an important one and I almost don't want to.
Okay, let's not. Keep going.
Well, or wherever we go with it. But it's like, it's funny because, and this is honest to God, this is the way, which is cool that we're doing this. This is no different than if you or I were just shooting the shit.
Yeah.
The bar, I don't know where the bar is set with a lot of guys too. And then there gets into this. Sometimes you'll see something going on and it's okay with whoever the mixer, like they're totally fine with whatever. Like they're nailing it. You know what I mean?
I know.
And I wonder, and I know people like yourself and I and some of our peers that we obsess over it for better or worse.
Yeah.
And but not everyone does that, but a lot of times, man, these guys they're just totally happy with what they've got, which tells me that in a lot of circles, the bar is set fairly low. Or
I think
I don't know what the deal is.
I think that's true.
I've had.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and there's a lot of times too, and it is a little bit. No, you know what? No, it's not out of ego that I want some of these mixers to ask me questions, but like I enjoy the banter, just like I enjoy this.
Yeah,
man, I love it when there's someone from a support act. Now that's mind you, that's assuming that my show is something that is any bit at all impressive to them, and they do want to know. But anyway, there'll be a lot of times where we'll have a support act, and I'll be like, man, you guys so close to getting it.
Yes.
I wish we could talk. Not to be like, do this, do that, but like, let's talk. And then like, it goes with that sort of attitude of like, yeah, it's all good. And it's like, I don't know that it is. Like, I wish you would ask me, but totally. I don't know that you have that. I mean, I don't want somebody that's just blowing me up, nor would I ever would want to have done that to anyone in the past. But if I found someone willing to talk that was an older engineer, you better believe I'd take advantage of it. You
100%.
know what I mean? And appreciatively so. And you just don't find that many guys that want to talk. Like they just want to get back to the bus and high five and be like, wow, we crushed it. So I don't know.
That's so weird. I mean, in all of this discussion, I don't want this to sound like out there in the internet world. I don't want this to sound like we're slagging engineers out there. We're not. What we're talking about is trying to improve, trying to help you to improve yourself to achieve, excellence. There's this huge thing, when I do like master classes and when I'm talking to other engineers, there is a lot of engineers out there who are very good, but then there's a lot of guys. Then there's a few guys that are like, wow. And so what separates those two things? And the way that I always kind of describe it is it's like this. Eddie Van Halen is not an amazing guitar player simply because he rehearsed more or spent more time in his, as a teenager playing guitar more than anyone else. Eddie Van Halen is amazing because it's just in him, right?
Yes.
So like that, it's true of engineers. And I have spent a bunch of time like kind of realizing that for myself, and I can't speak to you or other engineers, but for myself, I realize that there is a lot of stuff that I do that is inherent, like God-given. Like I didn't have anything to do with knowing how to fix that guitar tone or whatever. And so I struggle with that because how do I teach someone that? Like that's Eddie Van Halen can't teach someone else how to be Eddie Van Halen. I'm not saying that I'm Eddie Van Halen, but I'm just saying that's the hardest part that I have when I want to give back to the sound community. I want to teach people. That's the hardest thing that I have is it's like there are times where I'm sitting in a masterclass and I will do something in that masterclass that will make the mix sound significantly better. And someone will always ask, how did you know to do that? And my answer is no idea. I just knew, and so there's this weird kind of moment that I have where I could see that there's really good engineers out there. I just want to help them to be the top 1%, those top 1% guys. And that's what I think you were talking about was, the guys that are just high-fiving and going to the bus, they don't want to be that 1%,
And sometimes I'm jealous of them. I wish I didn't care so much. You know what I mean?
It's true.
It would save me a lot of fucking headache. Just being honest. I'll say this: the guys and gals that do want to be the best and that do have that, they really want to know and they want to know why, and they almost ask questions in the same vein as like a child who's just truly curious.
Totally.
How'd you do it? That same person would probably be excellent at selling insurance because it's just, if that were their passion, because it's just in them, and I don't know how you instill that in someone. I can say this for me though. What I know this, and I've said this a lot. I don't think speaking for me, I have a lot of drive. I have a lot of passion for music. I don't know how naturally talented I am. And in a lot of ways, of course, we are all our own worst enemy. But I know that for me, a lot of what the stuff that I've learned and the skill sets I have has come through practice. In other words, I am the kid that would stay late after basketball practice and shoot 100 free throws before I went home, because I'm not the kid that walked into the gym off the street that could just naturally score 40 and go home and eat a bag of Twinkies. Like that's not the way it works for me. I've had to like really hone in on it.
Interesting.
So that's why I do like when people want to engage, because I'm like, I hear you, I feel you. I was the same, truth be told, it's probably a mixture of both. It's like this innate ability you have to listen and to assess, and then it's learned. But for everybody, you see the guys, I'm like, you were a guitar player. And I'm sure that plays a huge role in how you're able to do, like, you'll see people where you can tell, like, they're a little more talent and gut, and he's a little more analytical and this and that. And you can kind of see it's weird.
It's like, there are a lot more engineers these days that have never been a musician. And so I don't know how that works. Like, how do you have a conversation with an artist about, hey, I think the guitar should be louder in the bridge, when you don't have any sort of musicianship knowledge?
Well, to your point, and this is what's great about this sort of back and forth thing. That's kind of me, because when I was a kid, and some people are able to do it all, I was so obsessive that while music was my passion, I was really into sports.
Okay.
And now there's plenty of people that were like, yeah, I went to basketball practice and came home and played the guitar. That wasn't me. And I'm so just like, when I got really into audio, that was all that mattered. So music was a passion of mine. And in turn, critical listening, not on purpose, became a skill set of mine. But it wasn't until I was 17 or 18 that I really was like, I want to mix. And I never did want to, and I could like play a few songs on the guitar. I could play a few songs on, my favorite songs. I knew 4 chords, kind of play drums. I wasn't worth a shit in anything, nor did I want to be. And I made a decision that I wanted to do sound, and I was a little different than I actually knew I wanted to do live sound because the concert experience, it was so big to me. So to your point though, I had to and have had to, and a lot of times with a good bit of trepidation, because I'm like, I don't know exactly, bridging that gap between engineer and musician. I've had to learn song structure as best I can. I'll be able to tell you what key we're in. I had to learn that over time.
Wow.
And a lot of that's just kind of going, oh God, what am I doing? Just winging it, So it's possible, but it takes a lot of work to do it.
Well, absolutely. I think, everyone has that story of, for me, it was in a recording studio where, somebody points to a piece of gear and goes, hey, kid, can you dial that up for me? And it's a piece of gear that I've never I don't know anything about it at all. No, right? No. I've never touched it. I don't even know what it does, but I turn to the guy and I go, yeah, no problem. I got you. Terrified, but somehow I was able to get through that and mess around with a bunch of stuff and make it look like I knew what I was doing. The fake it till you make it thing is truth, at least for the way that I came up. It was stuff that happened on a pretty regular basis.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking about this, so earlier today, because none of us are working, we have lots of time to talk, and I did a podcast with Paul Watson from Headliner, and
cool.
I like Paul Watson, and I forgot what the line of questioning was, but he was asking something. It was kind of similar to what we're talking about here, and I made note. This is kind of to put a positive spin on some of this too, and like you've already said, there's a ton of great mixers out there that are part of this younger crop of mixers
for sure.
And I have felt for years now that I'm like, I kind of feel like live sound, we almost got worse in a little ways as of late because there's so many tools available to so many people. And that's not just for mixers, that's on the system end too. Like you don't have to manipulate every page that's available to you in the processor,
Yes.
So with all of these options, it's kind of, I had a period of time here for several years and I'm like, this sucks. God, I must suck. This all sucks. You know what I mean? And here lately, I felt like I don't know if I've just run across, what I'm trying to say is I even know, I don't want to say names right now because I don't want to leave anyone out. Like I know a group of really solid mixers in this sort of, this particular, generation we're kind of referring to that. Like now some of the skill sets coupled with the technology know-how are starting to mesh. And now we're seeing more guys at 20, 21, 22 that have been using a compressor effectively for a few years. You know what I mean?
Very true.
And so there is, I'm seeing a little bit of the tide turn. I just want to make a point of that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. There are a plethora of young mixers, and I think it is a lot due to technology. Like when you and I were coming up, at least for me, I know that I didn't have any studio experience until my senior year of high school, and that was a one weekend in a recording studio in Los Angeles. And even at that, I was just a musician and I didn't even know what any of that gear did. And so was into my college experience before I got to even touch any sort of type of gear. Now we're talking about kids who are 6 years old with a laptop and Pro Tools and plugins and are already making records at home through their teenage years. And by the time they get to be 20, 21, 22, they're infinitely, they have had 10 years of experience, believe it or not, with some of these tools. And we never had the internet to, like this, like you and I talking about stuff, like we never had any of this. So, Those kids have all of those tools. All you have to do is go search on YouTube how do I get a kick drum sound? And there's 100 videos of how to get a kick drum sound. So I think it's a factor of that as well. There's people that are getting, 10 years of experience on gear, and then also, the learning curve of this. And so I absolutely agree with you. There are guys out there that are just kicking ass at it. I kind of just to sum all this up that we were talking about today, we didn't get to drums in this video, but I promise you guys we'll get to that. Maybe we'll do a drum video next, and I'll post that next video first before this one. But anyway, regardless, regardless, this is, I hope, an interesting discussion that you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys got something from it. But I don't know. Is there anything else you want to throw out there, Chris, specifically about what we've just been talking about?
No, I mean, truth be told, we could go for another 3 hours on it, but no, I think I do want to make a point real quick on your fake it till you make it thing. I've told people, I'll tell people all the time, one of the biggest things I did early on was I read all the trade mags. I read manuals. I read everything I could find. Of course, the internet was around, but it didn't have quite the proliferation of information that it does now. And the reason I did that was so that I could at least hang in a conversation. Totally. I had at least heard the phrases before. Yes. You know what I mean? Just like you turning to that piece of gear going, I think I know what this does.
I think I know what it does.
Enough.
Yeah.
That'll hold you just long enough till you really do know what the hell you're doing.
That's a great point that you point out. Obviously trade magazines and, people should be, definitely reading all that stuff. But for me, there's 2 books that every kind of guy that's coming up into sound stuff should be checking out. And one of them is that Yamaha Sound
Reinforcement Handbook.
Sound Reinforcement Handbook. That book, everyone should have read that book. You should check out the principles in that. That book's been around for like 20 years or more. But it's still fundamentally kind of, the thing. And if you have any inkling in system tuning or learning about systems, it's the guy from Meyer, and I feel horrible right now that Bob McCarthy. Yeah, God, I feel horrible that I couldn't remember his name, but his book, System Optimization, I think it's called, or something like that.
Something like that.
That is another, like, those are the 2 kind of gold standards. Is there another one that you'd recommend? Or
I knew you were going to say Yamaha, the Sound Reinforcement Handbook, and then no, that's pretty damn solid, right?
So those are the 2. So if you're just starting and you're like checking these videos out, or even if you've been around for a while, like, go back and check those books out. Literally, I have both of those books are like on my bookshelf, and even every once in a while I'll like check it out and be like, I don't remember what Bob said about this. Right. And, so anyway, all right, guys. Well, thanks a lot for tuning in. We're going to do a bunch more of these. I hope you guys are enjoying these. Chris's social media at Chris Rabold on Instagram. And then I'll give you guys a splash screen here in a minute with all my social media. Make sure that you subscribe, stay in touch with us, hang in there, wash your hands, stay inside.
There you go.
All right, guys. We'll see you in a little bit.